I've objected to it most of my life, to the whole pride thing, and mainly on taste grounds, it has to be said. I don't begrudge anyone having a party. I do begrudge people mistaking their sexuality for some massively important signifier, which demands that other people then not just respect them, but pay them some special dues. And actually, in actual fact, you could see this. So I've stumbled across Pride a couple of times in my time. I've never gone, but I've stumbled across it a few times. And one of the things is, on a simple matter of aesthetics, a taste that I deeply dislike, is seeing a bunch of disco gays on top of a bus waving to the public as if they're celebrities. Sorry, love, you're not a celebrity, you're just gay. That's all. And you shouldn't treat the general public as your audience, waiting for them to celebrate the magnificent, wonderful you. So I think there's just this nasty narcissism at the heart of this. And I've got no time for it.
To the civil service in the UK. They've put out some draft policies relating to gender and sex. There's about 500,000 people work in the civil service in the UK. And they are suggesting in these new policies that perhaps only people who have a genuine certificate from a doctor saying that they are transgender should be able to go into single-sex toilets. And it also suggests that people should be respectful of all views when it comes to gender identity, including people who might think that transgenderism isn't all it's cracked up to be. The lefty website Vice has hit out and said, oh, this is transphobic. I think most people would say it's common sense.
Yes, transphobic is one of those words you have to be really careful with, like gender-affirming care or gender-affirming surgery or trans kids. A lot of language is being smuggled past us at the moment that means really something else. In the case of this appalling, disreputable website, Vice, it's a real muckraker of an organization. It started off as quite fun many years ago and has become completely woke and unreadable. The correspondent who wrote this used to actually be the so-called LGBTQIA+ correspondent for the BBC, until the BBC realized that actually this wasn't having a correspondent writing about gay issues, it was actually having a sort of ambassador within the organization. So he's now retreated to Vice, and he continues his campaign, and that's what it is. It's a campaign. This isn't journalism. And on this occasion, his pro-trans campaign and pro-transing of kids and everyone else campaign has ended up with this desperate attack to pretend that what you quite rightly described as common sense is in actual fact transphobic. And of course, it's no such thing. This document says quite rightly that there will be some people who have gender critical views. That's what we all used to feel quite recently, again, common sense. But this piece sort of says how can a trans person in the civil service possibly coexist with somebody who quote denies my identity? Well, they don't. They just have a different opinion from you, love. And you know, that's one thing in this world, isn't it? You've got to rub along with people of different opinions. But as I say, once again, it's like the be kind people. All those people who say we just want tolerance. Oh no, so many of them don't. So many of them don't want tolerance. They just want wild acceptance of themselves, deep intolerance of anyone who disagrees with them.
How to be genuinely proud of our great countries, both America and the United Kingdom, two of the greatest countries in the world. It's almost like every day now, somebody somewhere, normally on the left, the woke left, is queuing up to find a reason to hate the countries and their histories.
Well, it's a kind of grievance competition. Your guest earlier just tried to engage in it. I don't know what hurt she believes she's had from slavery. All of this was addressed 2 centuries ago. Everything has consequences. All history has consequences and ramifications. But, you know, if we were to play this fairly, we would at least look at all of the countries around the world that engaged in the slave trade who are simply not interested in any form of reparations, the Ottoman Empire, all the Arab countries who not just traded far more slaves than across the Atlantic, but castrated all the men so that there wouldn't be any more African slaves after them. They worked them to the bone. I see no interest across Africa in paying reparations for selling their brother and sister Africans into slavery or for working them to the bone to the present day. There is slavery across Africa today. In fact, there are more slaves in the world today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. So some of us are simply a bit bored of hearing people ripping at closed wounds and then crying about their hurt or their presumed hurt, because everybody could do this. 1 million Europeans were stolen by North Africans over the course of decades of the North African Barbary pirate slave trade. Where would you end if you did that? The answer is you couldn't end, because nobody is alive who has actually suffered the hurt, and nobody is alive who did the wrong. And I'd make one other point, if I may. It's always the countries that people want to come to who are put through this struggle session. Britain, like America and France, are the most desired destinations for migrants worldwide and have been for centuries. Why is that? It's not because we're racist, it's because we're better, it's because we're good, it's because when we see racism, we actually call it out and recognize it as a sin. Try finding that across Africa, try finding that across the Middle East or in China. Nobody would hear. So what we have is a situation where the more virtuous countries are presented as the worst countries. It's sick, and most of us are tired of it.
Thank you, Douglas.
I am so sorry that Douglas is bored by the pain that has come from
That's not what he said.
Through slavery.
He didn't say. He didn't say. See, but what you're doing there, yeah, but hang on, Paula. Paula, you're being very disingenuous. That's not what he said.
I am.
And viewers aren't stupid. They know exactly what he said. He's not saying he's bored by the pain. He's saying, and I think it's a perfectly valid point, the pain that people who are alive today are claiming they're suffering for what happened 200 or 300 years, it's not a real pain. They're not the ones who suffered what was going on 200 or 300 years ago.
So in terms of justice for all, I mean, I think we'd all agree that there should be justice.
Well, I'm not suffering from when the Normans invaded this country.
Agree.
I'm not suffering from what my ancestors went through.
I noticed that I'm not being allowed to respond.
Or from the Romans. In other words, where do you take this? I mean, should I now be feeling pain from what the Romans did to this country?
In terms of slavery, I can take it to 2015, when the slave owners were compensated by the government. So I can take it to that extent.
Where does your personal pain come?
And I can say to you that I don't think that apologising is a bad thing. I think that apologising for a wrong is a good thing. I think that the Dutch royal family have done a fantastic thing in acknowledging what has gone wrong.
Okay, I hear you, but I honestly think it'll make
gone back a couple of decades and said, what are we going to spend our time debating in the world's most advanced democracies, in Britain and America? We might have thought 20 years ago, well, gosh, since we've got the internet and access to all this knowledge and the opportunity to exchange ideas, we might solve all sorts of things. Instead, we're discussing things like what's a woman and when was America founded? So actually, we've become stupider. And I, at any rate, blame people like Hannah Jones and her fellow fabulists. And I wish they wouldn't hold everyone back.
So, folks, hope you enjoyed what we had on tap for you today. Did Douglas bring you the goods on tap? Did he bring you the goods, or did he bring you the goods? Right? Talking about how great America is, how great Britain is. Talking about how victor mentality, talking about what was going on in the civil service and how they're basically having transgendered, the same thing we're having on this side of the pond, folks. They're basically ripping the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Armed Services of all testosterone whatsoever and replacing testosterone with transgenderism. They're doing it over in Britain in the civil service things. I mean, it's amazing. Reparations. Oh, come on. We've done with reparations. Are there any slaves present today? And then we talked about that we are just becoming stupider and stupider. A lot of people are becoming stupider and stupider. Douglas isn't. You guys aren't. I'm certainly not. We're trying to learn as much as we can every day and try to wade through this diarrhea of BS, which is basically excrement in front of us every single day that's spilling out from these leftists and these lunatics and these liberals. Social media, the alphabet network, LGBTQIA, MOUSE, the alphabet networks, academia, universities, colleges. It's coming at us from all directions, folks. The verbal diarrhea is just pouring out every single time you talk. But it's so fresh and nice to hear because Douglas Murray, man, he brought the receipts in those things, didn't he? We hope you enjoyed that, folks. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. Comment below. Let us know what you think. Did you enjoy what Douglas had to say, or are you on the other side, crying victimhood all day long? Woe is me, woe is me. Let me hear from you guys as well. Take a look at our video links above and below. My final thought is always, when you're right, you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.